They're both Austrian. They both come from legendary, battle-proven firearm brands. They're both full-size, polymer frame, striker-fire 9mm duty guns built to perform. But only one is famous. You already know its name. You've seen it in movies, in duty belts, in basically every gun store in the world. The other one? Well, most people have never even heard of it. So today, I'm putting the Glock 17 up against the Steyr L9-A1. And I'll be answering the question of why this Steyr never got famous, even though it's technically better. Stick around to find out. Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of Dennis at the Range. Today we're talking about the Steyr L9A1. We're gonna briefly go over the history of Steyr, then dive deep into how this pistol was developed, and after that we're gonna do a deep dive on every single component, comparing it to the Glock 17. And in the end, we'll talk about why Glock ended up dominating military and police markets worldwide. For those who are new on the channel, I'm French and I like guns, and since I have access to a bunch of cool guns, I decided to make this channel to show you guns.
That actually makes sense.
I also have an Instagram at Dennis at the Range, so make sure to follow me on there too. Let's start with a brief story of the company behind this pistol, Steyr Mannlicher. This is one of the oldest and most important firearm manufacturers in the world, and it's 100% Austrian. I'm interrupting this video to talk to you about CNP Tir. CNP Tir is a gun shop in Tours, which is about 3 hours away from Paris, and they're the gun shop that lent me most of the pieces that are in the channel. They are the first ones to believe fully in Dennis at the Range, so I really have to thank them a lot for that, and I'm really grateful. They just lent me the guns, I do whatever I want with them, and then I give them back. They have absolutely everything, and I was very surprised when I walked in and I saw all that there is here. They have all the latest things that come out from the industry, and they also have a bunch of old vintage rifles with a lot of history. They truly are a one-stop shop for anything related to firearms. I am right now in their vault, and you can see there's just everything. So again, thank you very much to CNP. Now let's get to the video. The company was founded on April 16, 1864 by Josef Verndl and his brother Franz in the town of Steyr. They started a small weapon factory and sawmill called Josef and Franz Verndl and Company. Josef was an industrial pioneer, and right from the beginning they were focused on high-quality rifle production for the Austrian military. By 1869 they had turned it into a stock corporation called, and get ready for this one, Österreichische Waffenfabrikgesellschaft, which means Austrian Arms Manufacturing Company, and the business just exploded. In the late 1800s, they brought in the genius engineer Ferdinand Ritter von Mannlicher. He invented or perfected things like clip-fed magazines, straight-pulled bolt actions, rotary magazine, and a bunch of early semi-auto and automatic rifle designs. Under Mannlicher, the factory became the biggest weapons producer in the world by the 1890s. They supplied rifles to armies all over Europe and beyond. Steyr kept innovating throughout the 20th century. They produced pistols like the Steyr M1912, machine guns, and even worked on early aircraft engines. After World War II, don't ask what they did during World War II, they rebuilt, and in 1958 they came out with their first assault rifle, followed by the absolute icon, the Steyr AUG, or OG, I don't know, I call it OG, bullpup rifle in 1977. That rifle changed military thinking forever with its modular design and was adopted by armies around the world. They also made high-end sniper rifles like the SSG series. In 1989, the weapons division was spun off and called Steyr Mannlicher to honor Ferdinand Mannlicher. They kept pushing boundaries, and in the early 90s they decided to jump into the new polymer-framed pistol market that Glock had basically invented. Today, Steyr is owned by a Czech investment group called RSBC Holding, and they are coming out with really cool pistols like the one I did right here. But that's enough for Steyr. Now let's get into the story of this pistol. The Steyr L9A1 story starts in the early 90s. Gaston Glock had just blessed us mortals with the beautiful Glock 17, winning the Austrian military contract in 1982 and then spreading everywhere like wildfire. By the way, I also did a video on Glock right here. Steyr had actually competed against the Glock in those original Austrian trials, and well, it lost. From what I've researched, it was the engineer Wilhelm Bibitz that would design this pistol. He was a former Glock employee, and he had some ideas on how to make the perfect pistol even more perfect. Apparently, Glock snubbed him and he ended up going to Steyr. The design work was led by engineer Friedrich Egner and, well, him. And the first pistol, called the Steyr M9, was officially unveiled in 1999. They quickly added the M40 in 40 Smith & Wesson and the M357 in, well, 357 SIG. The original M series had a few issues, so in 2004 they released the A1 generation with better improvements. It had a more aggressive grip texturing, a straightened trigger guard, a single slot accessory rail molded right into the frame, and better ergonomics overall. The pistols disappeared from the US market for a bit while Steyr sorted out their distribution, then came back stronger around 2010. In 2013, Steyr introduced the L for large series, and that's the L9A1 that we have today. It has a longer 4.5-inch or 115mm barrel compared to the standard M9's 4-inch or 102mm barrel. It has a taller grip that holds a 17-round magazine instead of 15 and extra front slide serrations. The whole MLCS family was designed from the ground up to be a Glock alternative. It kept the same basic safe action striker fire concept, but with what Steyr thought were meaningful upgrades in ergonomics, trigger feel, bore axis, and internal construction. It was aimed at police and military use, but also civilians who wanted something a little bit more refined. The L9A1 never became as famous as the Glock, but it earned a loyal following amongst people who shoot it because of its low bore axis. Real quick for the people that don't know what bore axis is, it is simply the distance between the center line of the barrel and the highest point of your grip on the frame. The space between those two lines is called your bore axis. So a higher bore axis is like a longer lever, which is going to mean more muzzle flip. This is the opposite for a lower bore axis. So anyways, enough talking, let's get to the comparison. Here we have both boxes, so let's see what they come with to do a direct comparison. I'll start with the Glock. So I am choosing a Glock Gen 4 because at the time that the Steyr came out, there was a Glock Gen 4, so it wouldn't really be fair comparing it with the new Glock Gen 6. It's the same box anyways as the Gen 6, so let's open it up and see what it came with. I mean, nothing special. Here we have the Glock 17 Gen 4 with the Gen 4 magazines. The gun is clear, so let's put that aside. Then we have the Glock plates, which, I mean, it's the MOS system, nobody uses this anyways, even today. We have two different back straps, regular stuff, the bullet pusher, the manuals, and that's basically it for the Gen 4. Okay, now we have the Steyr, let's open this one up. There's spaces for each thing instead of just throwing the Glock and just randomly putting things inside. This is a little bit more organized, so I like it a bit more. We have two 17-round magazines. You notice it says 15, but there's the plus here. We'll go over the mags a bit later. Then we have the Steyr L1. It's clear. Put this to the side. These are two small keys that we are going to be talking about very soon. And let's keep them here just so I don't lose them. And on top, we have the instruction manual. Nothing too crazy with this. Okay, let's look at the gun now. So here we have both contenders. Let's start from the top to the bottom. In this case, the top is going to be the sights. So we'll talk about the sights first. There's this very big complaint about the Glocks that their sights are completely garbage. And I mean, it's true. I'm a Glock owner and it is a valid complaint because even though everyone today should be running red dots, it's very important to have backups. And if the backups are complete garbage, then I mean, that's not cool. The Glock ones are just the regular Glocks. Nothing too crazy about them. And then on the Steyr, there's other models that have kind of like a triangle in the front. So there's a triangle in the front and in the back, there's like two notches. The sights are metal. They are a bit stronger and tougher. So I think that's a point for the Steyr. Now, if we look at the top of the slide on the Steyr, this little hole right here is a chamber witness, so you can see if there's a bullet chambered. So the gun is clear, but if there were to be a bullet here, you could see the brass. And same thing goes, there's this thing on the back over here. Let me show you what it does. There's a button right inside over here that you push, and when you push that, it's gonna have this little thing that's gonna come out from the back. You see, right here. That thing again is a loaded chamber indicator. Now there's two because you have one here so you can physically see it, but if it's at night and you can't really see it, or if your gun is holstered, then you can pass your thumb right here and you can feel if your gun is chambered or not. Then we move on to the slide serrations. The Glock, this is a Gen 4. Even in the beginning of the Gen 5, there were no slide serrations in the front. This Steyr, even if it came out at the same time, it does have slide serrations. So that's another plus for the Steyr because I really like slide serrations. I think it's very cool to have access to your slide right here to do press checks or even tap racks. I like to do it here. So that's another point for the Steyr. Looking at the accessory rails over here, we have two slots in the Steyr and we have one slot in the Glock. I mean, I don't know how important that really is. It's a little bit longer on the Steyr, but yeah, you can mount basically anything on a Glock, so that doesn't really matter. Then we can take a look at the slide release. The slide release on the Glock, some people have had complaints. That's why on the Gen 6 they put more protection around the slide release. On the Steyr, I don't really like the slide release It's small, it's kind of awkward, I don't really like it, and some people will mind, I don't really care. It's not ambidextrous. So people might care, I don't care, honestly. On the Glock, however, it's not ambidextrous either. It's only ambidextrous on the Gen 5. Now, right below that, we have the magazine release. The magazine release on the Steyr is not ambidextrous. However, you can change it to the other side. So that doesn't really take a lot of time. That's quite easy to do. It's very thin and long. That's what she said. Which, I mean, it's not bad. Like, filling it here, I still need to break my grip because it's still quite strong. But it's exactly the same thing for the Glock. I mean, on the Glock, it's not ambidextrous, but you can change it. And I still need to break my grip to properly take out the magazine. Now, both these guns right here have finger grooves. On the Gen 4, it's the famous 3 finger grooves, which they got rid of in the Gen 5 and consequently in the Gen 6. On the Steyr, we have finger grooves that are a little bit different. So there's kind of only 2, but the third one is implied here. So they're different, but the Steyr does feel a little bit better in my opinion. However, I don't really care about finger grooves because I run a Gen 5 and there's no finger grooves on that one, and that's what I was trained with, so I don't really care. But now looking at the beaver tails, we can see that the Glock has the regular beaver tail, but the Steyr kind of goes, it goes deeper. You can see that the Steyr has a little bit more depth, so you can grab it a bit higher and contribute to that low bore axis that this gun is very famous for. Since it's kind of thick here in the back, I'm not really worried about getting slide bite, whereas sometimes on certain Glocks, if you grab it a little bit too high, you will get slide bite. I have never gotten slide bite. Maybe this video is just pure Glock coping, but I try to be unbiased, and I mean, I'm not a professional shooter anyway, so it's not like I have crazy experience with these guns. Whereas the texturing on the Glock is basically the same thing all around, except for the finger grooves. On the Steyr, it is a little bit different. So on the back, we have this very weird, it's kind of like ridges. It's not really good. Honestly, it's not really good. It doesn't feel good. It doesn't grip good. Not saying that the Glock one is better. I run a grip tape on my Glock, so that says a lot about how trash the Glock grip is, but I think it's even worse on the Steyr. They want to do something, but it's kind of like grip tape, but it's not grip tape. It doesn't hold anything at all, so I don't really like it. And here is where Glock would get another point, because there's so much aftermarket support for Glock that you can basically buy handle-it grips, talon grips, or whatever you want. I actually don't know how much grip tape you can buy specifically made for the Steyr. Now, the Magwell on the Gen 4 is not as good as the Gen 6, which is kind of obvious, but there's still some flaring here inside of the Glock Magwell, which there is none inside of the Steyr. So the Steyr, I guess, is a little bit harder to reload. And there's this notch coming out in the back. I haven't trained on these, so I don't know how hard it is to reload. I know Glocks are very easy to reload, and I really like mine because it reloads very easily. It's a Gen 5. I mean, I can say that the Glock is a little bit better just because it has this little flaring over here, but it's very minimal, and with training, you can unlearn and learn anything. So now, before we disassemble, let's look at the triggers. Glock has a reputation of having very bad triggers, however, they are very safe. So this is just, I think, a regular Gen 4 trigger. Nobody really expects anything from it. It's take up, mush, and then I'm just gonna keep pressing. Reset is very positive, so that's something that Glocks are very liked for. When it's resetting, it's gonna push your finger, so it's gonna be easier to reset. And I mean, some people like that it's an audible reset. I don't really care because I have my earmuffs on anyway, so I can't hear it. Now, if we compare it to the Steyr, again, gun is clear. The safety on the trigger for the Steyr is a little bit different. It doesn't hinge like it does on the Glock. It goes straight into the trigger. So this is the take up, and then I keep pulling and it breaks. And trigger reset is a lot worse on the Steyr, which is, I think, the main complaint that people have with this gun. It's a rare complaint, but they do have it. Trigger on the Steyr is a little bit less good, and that kind of says a lot because Glock triggers are bad, so I guess the Steyr is even worse. Now let's look at disassembly. This is a Glock, so disassembly is very easy. You just pull on the 2 small tabs over here, pull the trigger. On the Steyr, it's actually different. So there's this button right over here on the Steyr that you have to press, and then you have to twist this down. The trigger has already been pulled and the slide just comes off. We'll talk about this small button later because it's very important. But I mean, here we have both pistols side by side. On the right, we have the Steyr. On the left, we have the Glock. If we compare the recoil springs, the Glock Gen 4 has a dual recoil spring and the Steyr is just a single recoil spring. It is plastic, but it's not a complaint for me because the Gen 6 is plastic anyway, so that doesn't really matter. Here we have both barrels. The feed ramp on the Steyr is a little bit longer. The slide on the Steyr appears to be just a teeny tiny bit thicker. Here we have from the top, and then on the side, bottom, and the other side. What's interesting about the Steyr, and I think it's something that's actually pretty cool, is that while the Glock is a true polymer frame, the Steyr is not. And what do I mean by that? The Steyr has a full metal cage that has the whole mechanism inside it. Whereas the Glock, it's not really a cage. I mean, there's some parts here and there, and everything in the Steyr is put in place and connected by this metal frame. So technically, it's not a polymer striker-fired gun. It's a metal frame, polymer-covered striker-fired gun. Now I'm gonna put the Steyr back together because there's something that we need to talk about that I haven't gone through yet. And it's this little button over here. Let's talk about it. Now remember in the beginning when I said there was a small key that came with the pistol? Well, it goes right here. Now what does this do? You have to put the key in, push, and twist. You see that there's an F on top, and on the side there's an S, so F means fire, S is safe. And now that I've pushed in and twisted it, the gun is safe. There's nothing I can do with it. So if you want to piss off a Steyr L9 owner, just put it in safe and throw away the key, and then just let them figure it out. Lastly, we're gonna talk about the magazines. So both are 17 round magazines. Originally, these are 15 round magazines, which were made for the M9, but there's this plus base plate that's gonna add 2 rounds to the whole magazine. So you can see a round count in the back for the Glock, and on the side for the Steyr, you can only see to 15, whereas in the Glock you can see to 17, so it's a little bit better on the Glock. But I really like the polymer magazines on the Glock, because they do make it very, very easy to reload since there's less friction. Now I know that Glock came out with metal magazines for the 43X, but I mean, I don't own a 43X, so I don't really care. I really like the Glock 17 round mags. You can find them everywhere. They're not too expensive. And most importantly, they can be shared between a lot of guns, because whenever there's a new gun that comes out, it probably takes Glock mags. It's the standard.
What the fuck is this piece of shit?
These are very good. I'm sure they're very reliable. However, I don't really like that you cannot see if you have 17 rounds or not, which it's not really too important, but it's kind of cool to see. Let's talk about why the Steyr didn't become as famous as the Glock. I think the first one and the most obvious is that Glock was the first one on the market, so it has the first mover advantage, and they kept their advantage by marketing very heavily for civilians and law enforcement, things that Steyr was very bad at. Because if you remember in the beginning of the video, I mentioned that Steyr had a problem with distributing pistols in the US. So while everybody knows that Steyr makes the great AUG, they don't really know that Steyr makes pistols, so that's a very big element. The fact that Glock was number 1 means that more manufacturers were gonna make products specifically for the Glock, which they didn't for the Steyr. And as a consumer, when you have a lot of aftermarket support for your platform, I mean, it just makes a lot more sense. I mean, personally, that's why I went with Glock, because they're everywhere, it's ubiquitous, everyone has one, you can find parts for it everywhere, relatively cheap, you can customize it however you want, and this is something that you do not have with the Steyr. So even though the Steyr today is a super good pistol, overall, I think the Glock still beats it.